When my parents told me they were going on a weekend trip and would leave me home alone for the first time, I was excited. Finally, some time just for me. No strict schedules, no boring rules. Just me, the couch, my movies, and of course, freedom. They were a little hesitant at first, but I managed to convince them. "I'm already 17 years old," I said, and they agreed. Before leaving, my dad gave me the usual checklist: lock all the doors, keep your phone close, and call us if anything happens. I assured him I would, though I knew I'd probably ignore most of those instructions. I already had the perfect night planned: popcorn, soda, a bunch of horror movies, and between scares, chatting with the girls on my phone. Nothing special. As soon as they walked out the door, silence took over the house. It was a good silence, different from the usual. A silence of freedom. As night fell, I threw myself onto the living room couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, the soft glow of the TV lighting up the room. A horror movie was playing on the screen, something about vengeful spirits, but I wasn't paying much attention. Between scenes, I'd pick up my phone to respond to my friends' messages. We were throwing around ideas for the next movie to watch, and I laughed at the silly jokes they were sending. Everything was calm. More than calm, really. I was starting to feel that comfort that only comes when you're completely alone. Then my phone vibrated for the first time. A call. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. My first thought was to ignore it, but out of curiosity, I answered. "Hello?" Silence. On the other side, just a light breathing, almost imperceptible. "Who is this?" I asked, a bit impatient. "Nothing." I sighed and hung up, assuming it was a mistake. I went back to the movie and didn't think about it anymore. A few minutes passed and the phone vibrated again. This time, a message: "Hi." I looked at the sender, again, an unknown number. It was too late for someone to be joking, but I replied anyway. "Who is this?" The response came too quickly, as if the person had been waiting, someone who knows you. I rolled my eyes. Probably some prank. A silly joke, I thought. I went back to the movie and ignored it. But then the calls started coming more frequently. I answered a few, and it was always the same: silence, light breathing, but this time it was slower, more calculated. By the last few calls, I didn't even bother asking who it was. I just listened for a few seconds and then hang up. It was unsettling, but I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just a bad joke from someone with too much free time. It was during the fourth or fifth call that the voice finally spoke. Low, drawn out. "Enjoying your night alone?" My body froze for a second, and I looked around the room. How did this person know I was alone? I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. "Who are you?" I asked again, this time with a lump in my throat. On the other end, silence. I was about to hang up when the voice whispered again, "You look pretty comfortable on the couch." My heart raced. I was on the couch, under the blanket, but how did they know that? I stood up slowly, glancing around, and suddenly the living room felt different, as if every dark corner was hiding something I couldn't see. "Stop it," I said, trying to sound firm. I hung up, but my hands were already shaking. The silence now felt oppressive. The sound of the movie blended with my thoughts, and every small noise in the house, which I normally wouldn't notice, now seemed loud and threatening. I decided to lock all the doors and windows, just to be safe. Maybe I was overreacting, but a part of me already knew something was wrong. Very wrong. I went back to the couch, trying to focus on the movie and distract myself, but the phone vibrated again. And again. The messages started getting more specific. "You always leave the kitchen light on?" I looked towards the kitchen. The light was on. I hadn't noticed it before. How did this person know? A chill ran down my spine, and I started to wonder if I was really alone in this house. The next message was even worse. "Do you think the back door is locked?" My stomach dropped, and the reality hit me like a punch. I got up slowly, trying not to make any noise. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with every second, and I knew something was very, very wrong. The calls kept coming. Always the same thing: silence, breathing, and occasionally disturbing, short, and cryptic phrases. My anxiety was eating away at me, but I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just someone trying to scare me. I went to the kitchen, grabbed some more soda, and returned to the couch, remote in hand, but my focus was already far from the movie. What had once been fun had become an annoying background noise. I flipped through channels, looking for anything to distract me from that horrible feeling. That's when the news came on, and I almost changed the channel, but a sentence from the anchor froze me in place. "A dangerous serial killer, known as the Intruder, escaped from prison tonight. His victims are usually attacked in their own homes, places he meticulously studies before breaking in. Authorities urge everyone to reinforce their security and stay alert to suspicious behavior." I felt my stomach drop, and the hand holding the remote began to tremble. The coincidence was too disturbing. The calls, the messages, the feeling of being watched. I looked around the room as if expecting to find someone hiding in the dark corners. My heart raced, but I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that it was all paranoia. This couldn't be real. Not here, not to me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to turn off the TV. I wasn't going to let myself be carried away by this. I was alone, yes, but that didn't mean I was in danger, right? The silence in the house was now different. It was no longer the peaceful calm from before. Now, it seemed full of small noises, sounds I hadn't noticed before. Every creak in the wooden floor, every groan from the walls, seemed to echo louder. I stood still for a moment, listening, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it. Something clearer. A different sound. Like someone walking upstairs. My body froze. The noise was subtle, but unmistakable. Footsteps, heavy, slow. I stood there, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the heater or the wind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew the sounds of my house, and this was different. My legs felt like they were stuck to the floor. I tried to move, but it was as if my body wouldn't respond. It can't be. But the footsteps continued, moving from one room to another, with long pauses, as if someone was exploring, observing, calculating. This can't be real. I took a step back, almost tripping over the rug, and the sound stopped. A deep silence filled the room, as if the house was holding its breath along with me. I looked at the staircase, expecting to see someone coming down at any moment, but nothing. No movement. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I must be imagining things. I went to the kitchen, trying to distract myself. The light was cold, reflected off the steel surfaces. I grabbed a glass of water, my hands still trembling, and returned to the living room. I just wanted this to end. Then I heard it. A slow creak. The back door. My phone vibrated in my hand, making me drop the glass onto the floor. Water spilled across the floor, but I didn't care. My heart was in my throat. The message on the screen was from an unknown number. Of course it was. Do you think the door is locked? I looked toward the back door, fear crawling up my spine like an electric current. The doorknob was slowly turning. I ran over and locked it quickly, my heart pounding out of my chest. I couldn't remember if I had locked it before. Maybe it had been open the whole time. My phone vibrated again. Another message. You're at the back door. Smart move. But what about the bathroom window? My body froze. The bathroom window. I sprinted down the hallway, nearly slipping in my haste. When I got there, the window was slightly open. I was sure it had been closed earlier. I'm sure of it. I slammed the window shut, locking it, trying to control my breathing. Now I was certain. Someone was watching me, and not from a distance. From inside the house. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold my phone, but I had to see if there was another message. You're close now. I can hear you breathing. The sound of a creak behind me made me freeze. A step. Slowly, I turned my head. The hallway was empty, the shadows seemed to move along the walls like figures. I felt a lump in my throat, my body in full panic mode, but my mind refusing to believe it. This can't be happening. Another message. Just wait until I find you. I knew, at that moment, I wasn't alone anymore. He was inside the house. My heart was already racing, the sound of my own breathing filling the silence of the house. After that last message, I knew something was very wrong. This wasn't just a mind game anymore. His presence was palpable. He was here. I forced myself to walk down the hallway toward my room, each step more hesitant, my skin prickling with fear. The hallway lights seemed dimmer, the air heavier. When I entered my room, a chill ran down my spine. The window, it was open. I was sure I had closed it earlier. I walked over, trembling, and noticed something even worse. The screen on the outside was torn. Not an accidental tear, but a precise cut, made with some kind of blade. My heart stopped for a second, and a cold sensation swept over my body. He had come in through the window. With shaking hands, I slammed the window shut and locked it. I looked around, every shadow seemed deeper, more threatening. The room that had always been my refuge was now the setting for a nightmare. Every small detail that had been familiar now felt out of place. The pillows on the bed were tossed in an odd way, the lamp tilted at a strange angle. He had been here. He had touched my things. I crept out of the room slowly, my feet barely touching the floor. My only thought was to escape. I couldn't stay here another second. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard it. A noise, almost imperceptible, like something being dragged. It was coming from downstairs. The sound of heavy footsteps climbing the stairs paralyzed me. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was echoing through the corridors. He was coming up. Each step was methodical, calculated, as if he was savoring the hunt. I had to hide. Now. I ran down the hallway and slipped into the bathroom. I carefully closed the door, trying not to make a sound, but my hands were shaking so badly that the doorknob made a faint click. I held my breath, pressing my ear to the door. The footsteps paused for a moment, as if he had heard. Slowly, I crouched down, crawling to the bathtub. I lifted the rug and pulled out a screwdriver that my dad always kept there for emergencies. It wasn't a weapon, but it was all I had. I gripped it tightly in my hands, the cold metal against my sweaty, hot skin. The footsteps started again. Now, he was right in the hallway. Each sound grew closer. He knew where I was. He knew. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Absolute silence. The bathroom felt suffocating, the air thick, every sound amplified. What was he doing? Waiting? My phone vibrated in my pocket. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. Slowly, I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Another message, "I found you." Terror exploded inside me. Before I could process it, the bathroom door was kicked with brutal force. I screamed, instinctively throwing myself backward. The door rattled, the hinges almost breaking. With no time to think, I threw myself through the small bathroom window, feeling the glass tear into my skin as I tumbled onto the grass outside. The pain was sharp, but the fear kept me moving. I ran toward the back of the house, trying to find somewhere to hide, but his footsteps were quick now, almost running after me. I felt a hand grab the back of my shirt. I thrashed with everything I had, letting out a desperate scream. I broke free, but fell to the ground, and when I looked up, he was there. Tall, dressed in black, his face obscured, but his eyes shone with a chilling coldness. He was holding a knife, long and sharp, the metal reflecting the moonlight. I scrambled backward, my feet slipping on the wet grass. He walked slowly, savoring the fear in my eyes. There was nowhere left to run. The gate was closed, and I didn't have the strength to make a run for it. My whole body trembled, fear consuming me. With one last effort, I got up and ran back toward the house, stumbling through the kitchen door. He was right behind me. I needed a weapon, anything. In a panic, I grabbed one of the knives from the counter and turned just as he entered. His eyes locked on mine, and he smiled. A sadistic, cold smile. He lunged, and I threw myself to the side, raising the knife I held. Everything happened too fast. Time seemed to slow down. In the chaos, I felt the edge of his blade graze my arm, slicing the skin superficially. But in that last moment, I twisted, and the blade I was holding plunged straight into his abdomen. Shock crossed his face for a brief second before his eyes glazed over. He fell to his knees, the knife still embedded in his body. I backed away, gasping for air, my hands covered in blood, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. He stayed there, motionless. For a long time, the only sound in the house was my ragged breathing. The clock on the wall ticked with each second, but for me, it felt like an eternity. I stood there, unable to move, unable to believe it was over. My hands were still gripping the knife so tightly that my fingers ached. When I finally let go, I looked down at my body, the cut on my arm, the scratches on my face and legs. But the worst wounds weren't visible. I knew that, even though he was dead, something inside me would never be the same. The sound of sirens in the distance brought a strange sense of relief. I had survived. But I knew that even after that night, the fear would stay with me forever.